So my presentation was on the use of real-world data and real-world evidence in ultra-rare cancers. And essentially, real-world data are data relating to patient health status and or the delivery of healthcare routinely collected from a variety of sources. And this can include data from registries, electronic or medical records, and other related data. And real-world evidence is defined by the FDA as clinical evidence from about the usage and potential benefits or risks of a medical product derived from the analysis of real-world data. And in many ways, for ultra-rare cancers, there are potential roles for real-world evidence, and there are three major categories in a way. The first, and this is widely established, is to define the natural history of a rare disease in terms of the outcome, but also in terms of the response and efficacy to conventional therapy. And this is particularly important for a number of rare cancers where the role of standard treatment or so-called conventional treatment is not well defined. And such studies can provide a good benchmark for prospective data collection, as well as giving advice to patients and families in clinic regarding prognosis and the utility of available therapies. The second major role is in terms of post-authorization evaluation of new treatments. And of course, again, this is widely used for addressing safety and long-term efficacy questions. And I'd say that the role of real-world evidence in this setting is, again, well-defined. But I suppose the major role that we're all still sort of grappling with in terms of investigators and regulatory agencies and patient groups is the role of or the potential role of real-world evidence in the pre-authorization setting, either in terms of repurposing or label extension of a drug that's already approved for another indication, or in terms of almost a comparator arm for a novel treatment. And I'd say that in essence, this is still a work in progress, and that the role of real-world evidence in this setting remains to be fully defined. And in terms of examples, I gave a number of examples in terms of sarcomas for the use of real-world data in terms of defining the utility of available therapies, as well as the prognosis of ultra-rare cancers. And there have been a number of notable publications over the last few years. The first that I mentioned was a publication by Dr. Painter and colleagues in Nature Medicine from 2020, which was the angiosarcoma project, which was an initiative enabling patients with angiosarcoma in the United States and Canada to remotely share clinical information and biospecimens for research. And the aim of this project is to generate publicly released clinically annotated genomic data on tumor and germline specimens on an ongoing basis. And the major point that I wanted to make from this project is that angiosarcomas of the scalp, of the head and neck area, have a high tumor mutation burden and a dominant ultraviolet damage mutational signature, suggesting that ultraviolet damage may play a causative role in this disease, similar to melanoma. And the study also showed that immune checkpoint inhibitors are effective in this type of angiosarcoma. So I think a very important study in terms of the use of real-world evidence in a very, very rare disease. There are other notable examples of the use of real-world evidence. So the Atlantic retroperitoneal sarcoma group have developed a nomogram, which has been incorporated into the AJCC staging system for retroperitoneal sarcomas. And we've also performed studies documenting the safety and efficacy of conventional chemotherapy in very rare sarcoma subtypes, including a very rare disease called clear cell sarcoma. And of course, with the increasing use of molecular techniques, new subtypes of sarcomas have been identified, and real-world data have been very useful in terms of defining the prognosis of these entities, particularly important in the context of discussions with patients and families regarding treatment and the goals of treatment. So those were some of the notable examples that I wanted to highlight in terms of the role of real-world data in defining the outcome and the response of rare cancers to available therapies. In terms of post-authorization approval and the use of real-world data, I went through some notable examples in more common tumours, and with particular reference to rare cancers. I mentioned the line extension by the FDA for the use of palbociclib to include an indication for men with metastatic breast cancer based on marketing reports and electronic health records that demonstrate consistent tolerability profiles similar to women with metastatic breast cancer. And then I finished off with the role of, or the potential role of real-world evidence in the pre-authorization setting, highlighting the challenges and the expense of conducting randomized controlled trials, particularly in very rare cancers. And also highlighted the challenges of using real-world evidence in this setting, because essentially the data set's often not designed to provide the level of evidence required for product approval or for really addressing regulatory questions. There are, of course, quite complex statistical issues involved, and the challenges of combining data elements from different sources. And of course, there are very major privacy and data access rules involved. The FDA of course, have a modified drug approval process based on the 2016 21st Century Cures Act. And there are examples of the use of real-world evidence in non-oncology settings for drug approvals. But I'd say for oncology at present, and for the in particular for ultra-rare cancers, this is very much a work in progress that will need collaboration between not only researchers, but patient groups and regulatory agencies. Notably, the European Medicines Agency do have a drug repurposing process for approving drugs licensed for other indications. And there is an application currently for the use of the mTOR inhibitor sirolimus in a very rare type of cancer called epithelioid hemangiopericytoma. So in essence, I think, the real-world data have an important role in defining the natural history of a disease, particularly new molecular entities, as well as documenting the utility of conventional therapy. Real-world data have an established role in the post-authorization setting, but again, in the pre-authorization setting, it's still very much a work in progress, requiring collaboration with the regulatory agencies.